Development on a fifth Halloween was fast-tracked to meet a preset release deadline of October 1989. Producer Mustafa Akkad turned to Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers writer and director Alan B. McElroy and Dwight H. Little to return for their respective duties on the fifth film. However, both declined. Ramsey Thomas assumed producing responsibilities from the fourth film's Paul Freeman and opted to hire playwright Shem Bitterman as screenwriter. Bitterman's script, entitled Halloween 5: The Killer Inside Me, which was written in the span of 3 days, featured an evil Jamie Lloyd and resurrected Michael Myers once again. However, Akkad was adamant about making Michael Myers the sole antagonist of the 1989 film Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers.
I prayed that he would burn in hell, but in my heart, I knew that hell would not have him.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, Jim.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Chills and Thrills. Connor here along with Chris. And as we continue through the Halloween franchise, today we are knocking down Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers. And I know we both came pretty high off of Halloween 4. And when I was a younger kid, I was big into all of these movies. And this every one of these movies was one of my favorites, which is because it was true when I was younger. And I couldn't get enough of them. And then as I became like a teenager and came into like my late teens, early 20s, I was not like Halloween 5, just my love for it and my appreciation for it just faded severely. And I was this is one that I started to go back to less and less. And even when it was on TV, I would kind of be like, you know what else is on TV? I wouldn't sit and watch it. And it's crazy because I used to actually just, again, like 4 and, Halloween 2, like I loved it. And on this rewatch, I was kind of dreading rewatching it because I was just like, this, it's so boring. It drags. It does this. It does that I don't like. And so like I sat down and I was like, you know what? I have to watch it because I haven't watched it in a while. I need the refresher for the episode. So I sat down and I watched it. And I actually had a lot more of a good time than I remember over the last probably like 8 or 10 years watching this movie. Because I said like late teens, early 20s, this film started to fall in my rankings and my appreciation of this franchise severely. And I know it's because certain characters that people don't like and things like that. And I kind of think that I let other people's perspective of this one kind of knock my perspective of it down. So on the rewatch, I actually did enjoy this quite a bit. I wouldn't say up to par quite with Halloween 2, and Halloween 4, but definitely not as bad as I was making it out to be coming up into my rewatch of it. So Chris, what did you how did you feel about Halloween 5 on the rewatch?
Yeah, when I was a kid, I think I mentioned that I had this one. I owned this one before I owned 4. Like when I was slowly getting the DVDs, I owned this one for a long while before I ever got 4 on DVD. So in a lot of ways, it feels like like this one precedes that one like in my memory because I watched this one all the time and just a lot more times than 4. And there was a couple years there where 4 was just the one I watched like because this one was next. And um rewatching it, it's definitely, I think I would now say it's definitely inferior to 4, but I don't hate it. I don't love it necessarily. It's not one of the strongest entries in the series, but I don't know if I feel like the stink or the sort of bad vibes of what it kind of leads to, or the kind of unsatisfying resolution to what this movie was kind of kicking up, is more of what gets kind of pasted onto it as this really bad reputation, when this movie itself doesn't really do all too many things that are really all that horrible. I think kind of going into this like psychic connection between Jamie and Michael is a little odd. It's a little bit of a weird plot device. It's kind of the first time that this sort of Michael Myers side of the franchise, outside of part three, is kind of going overtly kind of supernatural or fantasy. Like Michael's always been like hard to kill and unexplainable in terms of his strength and everything, and things like that. But like a psychic connection, the franchise hasn't really done anything like that yet. And so that's kind of like a wonky thing. There are some annoying characters in here. It is like, it's weird to say that at 95 minutes it's like one of the longer entries in the series, and that it's got, or like 97 minutes, something like that it's like got some kind of slower pacing, but it kind of does. And it's kind of just like a weird execution. Everyone loves Danielle Harris so much as Jamie Lloyd, and she doesn't get a whole lot. She's mute for a big part of this movie and just like absolutely scared senseless for another part of it. Like, you don't really get to enjoy her performance and her character like as much kind of as you do in four. So there's just some things that kind of hurt it a little bit, but it's not this horribly terrible weak entry in the franchise, I don't think.
No, and I mean, there's things like there on the rewatch. There's pet peeves I had with it, like the two police officers that have like all the funny gag noises around them and stuff. Like
Yeah,
they give me a
they're
laugh.
if anyone ever watched Power Rangers, these two guys are like precursors to Bulk and Skull from Power Rangers. They almost even like the almost same thing with like having like the goofy little music that follows them everywhere.
Yeah, and they don't kill the movie for me because it's kind of it gives you a couple laughs here and there with some of the things they say or some of the like the actions that they do. And then like everyone hates on Tina for being like a crazy annoying character, and that Jamie being mute, and there are things that drag this movie down, but like on the rewatch, like these are things that I've seen in the movie, so like they didn't bother me as much, I guess, as they did growing up, and I just learned to like kind of accept them. Like, this is the film that we got, so I'm just gonna have fun with it. Like these guys are two like moronic cops that aren't taking their job serious, and so it's like I just kind of turned
Which
my brain off and had fun with it.
Yeah, which coming from a bit of a law enforcement family, I'm never a fan of. It's not anything that would ever ruin a movie for me, but I'm not a fan of the tropes of like, oh, cops are useless idiots. Like, I don't love that trope in movies, but that's fine. I can live with it.
When you got a horror movie like this, there's bound to be one or two cops that are the dumb ones or
You're not going to have
something.
the cop just come in and be the hero at the end of the movie. Yeah, so
No.
the authority figures and the people that you think can help have to be shown as ineffectual and useless for it to stay scary for all of the young main characters.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, I loved getting Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis back. I liked getting Sheriff Meeker back. The little bit we got Rachel back in this film, that I liked seeing her. Jamie, of course. So I mean, there are things that hold this movie up. I think the portrayal of Michael Myers is okayly done, and like and then there's other things that bring it down. So it's like a mixed bag for me, I guess, on
Yeah.
depending on the day I watch it.
Yeah, to me, very much that if, this is to Halloween 4 what Halloween 2 is to the original Halloween. You have the sort of the first entry that is sort of better, superior, solid, good, or I mean in the case of the original, a masterpiece, but just relative here. The first one and the fourth one are the better of the two, and then you have the sequel that kind of continues very directly with those casts. Then you have a sequel that continues very directly off of the first one. Halloween 2 and Halloween 5 are kind of the part 2 of those initial story arcs, and they kind of introduced a little bit more in different things. Halloween 2 is talking about Sam Hain, and then introduces the brother sister aspect with Laurie and Michael, and and Halloween 5 gets into this sort of psychic connection with Jamie and Michael, and does this tattoo thing and introduces this mysterious man in black, and kind of has this cliffhanger ending. So it's like, it's like they're more of that original, but like a little bit of a lesser version, but a solid continuation of it, even if they kind of throw some things into the lore that are kind of out of left field, but become kind of like important pieces of the franchise going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of thought of it. My buddy put like a good thing on it. Like they're adding things to your plate, but you don't know if you're gonna like how it tastes. So
Yeah, a little bit, and that's kind of the touchstone of any franchise that starts to go, especially horror franchises that are not notorious. It's not like Lord of the Rings or MCU or the Marvel movies where they sort of prided themselves on a lot of continuity and consistency. These horror franchises that were getting churned out one a year, like they kind of, once you get to entry 4, 5, 6, the continuity and the lore just starts to become a little bit more of a flexible thing and not a hard timeline. Like Michael's house in this movie doesn't really look anything like the house as we've seen it previously. It's kind of like this like big gothic mansion almost, with this, it's got the laundry chute and things like that, and it's like that is not what the house seemed to be in the first movie. Uh and the consistency of Loomis's scarring and burns from 4 to 5 don't really seem to add up, and like Jamie's established as being 7 1 year before this movie, but then they're calling her 9 in this movie, so someone must be mistaken about what her age is. Loomis says that his memory goes back 12 years to Michael's first night, but it was 11 years ago if you're doing your math right. Just things like that start to drive like an OCD movie fan like absolutely insane. But by the time you get to entry 5, I guess people just aren't fact checking this stuff as well, or not caring as much, and so that stuff. But I mean, those flaws are in these franchises forever now, so it's like maybe you should be doing it right if you're going to do it at all. So it's interesting.
absolutely. Well, let me give you some background on Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers. Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers is a 1989 American slasher film, co-written and directed by Dominique Othenin-Girard and starring Donald Pleasance and Danielle Harris. This is the fifth installment in the Halloween franchise, and after the success of the previous installment, Halloween 4: The Return of Michael Myers, this film was rushed into production by executive producer Mustafa Akkad. The original screenplay, which was still under revision at the time filming began, introduced elements of supernatural horror, including Jamie possessing a telepathic link to her uncle Michael Myers, as well as storied subplot in which Myers, under the influence of a cult centered around the ancient rune of Thorn, is driven to kill his bloodline. While the final cut of the film features a mysterious man in black character, the Curse of Thorn subplot was largely minimized, resulting in audiences and critics expressing some confusion, though it was expanded upon in the following film, Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers from 1995. This film was filmed in Salt Lake City in mid 1989. Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers was released theatrically in North America on October of that year by the independent studio Galaxy Releasing, and the film received generally negative reviews from critics and was a box office disappointment, becoming the lowest grossing film in the franchise.
Lowest entry in the franchise. Yeah. Yeah. When I was looking, it definitely seemed like, yeah, I mean, this was kind of it's not shocking to see why they didn't kind of immediately pursue a sixth entry, at this time of release.
Yeah, we finally get one 6 years later, and that jumbled up of a mess. I mean, we'll talk about that on our next episode, but man, it's I mean, yeah, you see this when people talk about Halloween 5, it usually is negative. They're usually at the bottom of people's ranking lists or their favorites of the Halloween films, but it's one of those films that, like I said, it goes from day to day how I feel about it. And like a couple years ago when I watched it, I I was very low on it, and then when I watched it for the rewatch for this episode, I sat down and enjoyed it. I hadn't watched it in a while, so and I genuinely enjoyed it. I kind of like turned my brain off and tried to enjoy some of the things about it that I didn't used to enjoy, and it was kind of like a mixed bags, and I got over it. So I mean, it'll be fun to talk about and see like where we go for our favorite categories for this and things like that. So I mean, I enjoyed it on the rewatch, and I I'm not as low on it as I once was. So I'm
Yeah,
glad
it,
we took
it
a chance.
plants some bad seeds that grow into some bad, trees or bad weeds rather in the next entry. But you know, and you could say, hey, don't make a movie that has all these questions or all these things and you don't have resolutions or answers or whatever, because then who knows what the future holds and you're dependent on the next movie. And then when there's a 6-year hiatus and the next movie's like kind of a mess, people are like, well, if it hadn't been for that damn Halloween 5 setting up all this nonsense, we wouldn't be dealing with this. So it's like it kind of laid down the tracks for a path that went really kind of off the rails when, had they kept it a little bit more to the basics or done things a little bit differently in this movie, maybe things would have gone better in the long run.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I kind of this morning, like before the podcast, I watched it as a two-parter. I watched 5 and then I kind of watched
Mm,
6 right away after it. So I don't know if maybe
yeah.
that's why I'm a little higher on 5
Yeah.
or
Well, I mean, six is so bad it'll get you high on any entry. Maybe I don't know, but and it's a shame. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's like I would have loved to actually get the proper Jamie Lloyd trilogy where Danielle Harris is her in all 3 movies, and all 3 movies come out in the span of like 3 or 4 years. Like it's all kind of consistent. And you get Donald Pleasance like the way that 4 and 5 feel like this kind of two-parter where they feel very consistent in like the look and the portrayals, and you have Sheriff Meeker and all that stuff. Like I don't know if it's implied that he got killed at the end. I don't remember if he was away, but like it would have been nice to see like them do that a third time, to do a third, like a proper 3-parter with this aesthetic, this style that 4 and 5 had.
kind of like a big climactic ending for with Meeker and Pleasance and Jamie
Yeah,
and
something to kind of resolve it in a way that this felt like, they call it the Thorn trilogy, but it's like it's really like 2 movies and then this odd epilogue kind of a thing. And it's like, but it is what it is. We'll cross those bridges when we come to them.
maybe they go back and they team up and try to avenge Rachel and Meeker's daughter.
Yeah, something,
Something
something.
crazy
There's
like
got to, yeah,
that.
something. Just Danielle Harris deserved her third movie, and Donald Pleasance deserved another movie before he got to his more advanced age and was nearly passing away. They both deserved one within like 2 years of this one coming out, I think.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Why don't we go ahead and we'll get into a trailer for Halloween 5, and then we will get into a plot synopsis on the film and come back with some numbers, fun facts, and our favorite categories on the film.
Sounds good.
Help me now.
We both know he's alive.
But you know where he is.
Halloween 5. This time, they're ready. This time, he's unmasked. And this time, he's back with a vengeance. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers.
On October 31st, 1988, Michael Myers is shot down a mine shaft by Sheriff Ben Meeker in the Illinois State Police, but manages to crawl out before dynamite is dropped down to assure his death, as seen in his last film. He floats down a river and stumbles upon the shack of an elderly hermit who nurses him back to health. 1 year later, he awakens and kills the hermit before returning to Haddonfield to resume the hunt for his niece, Jamie Lloyd. Jamie has been admitted to the Haddonfield Children's Clinic after attacking her foster mother. She has been rendered mute due to psychological trauma and exhibits signs of a telepathic link with her uncle. Dr. Sam Loomis learns of this connection and wants to use it to defeat Michael for good. Meanwhile, Michael kills Jamie's foster sister Rachel and begins stalking her friend Tina Williams. Jamie senses whenever her loved ones are in danger, triggering episodes of convulsions that disturb those around her. After unknowingly encountering Michael posing as her boyfriend that he killed, Tina attends a Halloween party at the Tower Farm with her friends Sam and Spitz. Sensing that Michael is following them, Jamie, having partially regained her ability to speak, escapes the clinic with her stuttering friend Billy Hill to warn Tina of the danger. As Spitz and Sam have sex in a barn, Michael impales the former with a pitchfork and decapitates the latter with a scythe, and also kills 2 bumbling deputies Loomis had entrusted to protect Tina. Jamie and Billy find Tina as Michael tries to run them down with a car. Tina ultimately sacrifices herself to save Jamie. With nothing left to lose, Jamie agrees to help Loomis to stop Michael once and for all. Loomis and Meeker create a setup at the abandoned Myers house to lure Michael back to his childhood home. The police receive a call saying Michael has broken into the clinic, prompting Meeker and most of the officers to leave. However, this call is merely a diversion. Michael appears and kills the remaining officers. Loomis tries to reason with him, but Michael slashes him and throws him over the stair banister. He pursues Jamie through the house and up to the attic, where she finds the bodies of Rachel, her dog Max, and Tina's boyfriend. As Michael raises his knife to stab her, Jamie addresses him as Uncle, causing him to pause. He agrees to remove his mask and let Jamie see his face, shedding a brief tear. However, when Jamie touches his face, he goes into a fit of rage and chases her again. Loomis reappears and uses Jamie as live bait to lure Michael into a trap. He shoots Michael with a tranquilizer gun and beats him unconscious with a wooden plank before suffering from a stroke and collapsing on top of him. Meeker and the police return and take Michael into custody. He is locked in a cell at the police station until he can be transferred to a maximum security facility for the rest of his life. As Jamie prepares to return to the clinic, the mysterious man in black who has been quietly observing all day arrives and shoots up the station. Jamie finds the bodies of Meeker and several officers, as well as Michael's cell broken open and empty. Realizing he has escaped again, she sobs in despair.
Do 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 do.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Very well read, sir. Very well read.
Appreciate it. I'm waiting for my audiobook deal.
Well, one of these days somebody's gonna hear it, and
Yeah.
they're gonna come along with the checkbook.
Uh-huh.
All right, why don't I dig into some numbers for you here on Halloween 5? So Halloween 5 had a budget of $5.5 million and a box office gross of just $11.6 million domestically. So what are those in 2025 numbers for us?
So that would be a budget of about $14.2 million and a box office result of about $30 million. So not bad, like a little over double, but not not the kind of numbers that get you Part 6 greenlit overnight, unfortunately.
I think the numbers sound a lot better in our modern money than it does back in 1989.
Yeah, well, it's all kind of relative, but yeah, it does, like, sometimes when you're younger, you kind of have a little bit of a mythic idea of what these movies might have been like when they were coming out, and you kind of get this perception like, oh, these movies must have been huge. These movies must have been very big and wildly popular. And sometimes putting them into the modern numbers, it's like, wow, it's like, yes, this was one of the lesser performing entries of the series, but it's like 30 million. It's like, if a movie came out today and made a horror movie even and made 30 million at the box office, that's like peanuts. That's like, who even watched that movie? It's kind of weird that it's like being part of this larger tapestry of this franchise is like, it does great things for the legacy of these movies, but you realize that some of these entries, especially these later entries when they were dropped and they were released, like, they really weren't moving the needle all that much. Now, granted, that's 30 million probably just in North America, which is a little different than if a movie were to make like 30 million worldwide today, So it's kind of a little bit of a different thing, but it is, and this is general inflation. Ticket prices inflate at a higher rate. So these numbers are probably all a little watered down. Ticket prices usually escalate in price at a higher rate than normal inflation. So it's just a general rule of thumb, but it's like, yeah, it's like, even if you say 35 or 40 million, it's like, it's really not much of an impact,
No, and as we said before, like, these a lot of these films, like early on, like didn't get like the big, you know, wide nation release all at once. They were
Indeed.
kind of hopped
Yes.
around.
Yeah, and they were very much a lot of them they were kind of, they kind of would hit regionally, and a lot of them it wasn't really about the theatrical thing, because this is starting to be the 80s is when the VHS era started to boom and the video rental stores started to boom. Back in the day VHSs were quite expensive, so there was a lot more rentals going on than purchases for certain markets. At least that market was bigger. So a lot of these were like, yes, they were made and released in theaters, but they were really making their bones, because in theaters, you have to be 17 to see it. We do check. When I was working at the theater as a manager and a staff before that, you do generally, as best you can, check IDs to make sure that kids aren't seeing R-rated movies if they aren't the appropriate age. So I mean, I'm sure that was going on back then too, but video rental stores, it's like, well, anyone could get mom or dad to just rent the video for them, and then you go and you watch it alone. It's not like mom and dad have to see the movie with you like in the theater. So there was just this whole different kind of market for these movies as like video rentals and things like that, where it was this whole different kind of avenue where it's like, oh yeah, you go, you get some friends together and you rent a couple of scary movies, and oh, it's Halloween, let's rent a couple of Halloween movies, let's rent all the Halloween movies, or what have you. So it's this whole kind of different cottage industry that they existed in, that was outside of, was it a big hit in theaters or not.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and like if these Halloween films would have been, if they would have got picked up by Paramount, like the Friday the 13th films, and been like huge wide releases, like what numbers could these have movies done, like coming off of Halloween 4, where it was praised by fans, like where would Halloween 5 have been, and where would Halloween the Curse of Michael Myers have gone, like if they were
Yeah.
all released nationally on this huge scale.
Yeah, and back then, they were sensitive to things like the diminishing returns. You started to see around this time too, is when like 89, that's when Jason Takes Manhattan came out. And you start to see that it's like, even if these movies were kind of like, oh, they still turned a small or moderate profit, the studios back then were very sensitive to seeing like, hey, these numbers keep going down and the budgets aren't really going down. So we're the profit margins are becoming, in the early days they were so cheap and they made so much that it's like, well, you can't deny it, we're going to keep making them because it's just easy free money. When the budgets start to naturally increase and the returns start to naturally go down, it's like, well, we're turning out a little bit more money each time to make these things, and we're cutting it a little closer on the break even point. And so it's becoming a less safe investment and a less surefire way to turn a nice nifty profit on the spreadsheets. So then it starts to become this whole thing of like, well, we're not going to go forward with another one. You saw a lot of the franchises, they were going annual, and then after 89, a couple of these movies take a 1, 2, 3, 4 year break, because it's like they were hitting that point where it's like, do we go forward with another one? Is it the best thing? Are we just going to spend more and make less again, and then we're not turning a profit? They were a little bit more hesitant on it. So it was just an interesting thing to see play out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't blame them, because I'm tight with my money as it is, and I mean, if I'm not doing as well, like it's almost like gambling. If I put $20 in, and if I can get it up to 40 or $60, I'm probably going to cash out. But as soon as I lose that 20 or $40 I put in, I'm not really a happy camper anymore.
Yeah, exactly. You got to play your cards. You got to play your cards the right way. You got to be careful about it. And it can be tough, it can be tricky, but yeah, studio executives, and especially like, Mustafa Akkad was kind of going like, what's like, the distributors for 4 and 5 are listed like it's like Galaxy Releasing or something like that, like a little kind of like ho hum distribution studio that wasn't one of the major studios. So it's like they were probably very you know their margins were probably very thin. They couldn't afford to have something that didn't turn a pretty clear profit. Like 5 probably only got made out of the proceeds of 4. And so if 5 didn't turn enough proceeds to fully fund the next entry, then you didn't get a next entry, and it had to go to another studio and become this whole other thing. But
Well, it's crazy to me that after the first Halloween, I know it took a while to finally like get to that 70 million that it made, but after they figured out that they had made that much money, you figure a major studio would have picked up for one of the sequels, like because
Well,
two,
2 and 3 were Universal, so
yeah, that's
So,
true. And then three kind of bombed, so I guess they gave up on
yeah,
that. And then you come to
yep,
4 and 5,
uh huh,
so that
uh-huh,
that does make sense. I mean, even with 4 doing well, you figure, okay, this film did pretty good. Like
yeah,
maybe another studio will pick up 5 and try to see like what they can
yeah,
pick up off of 5, like what little chump
yeah.
change they can make or whatever. If they can
It
make
would it
20
would have
million
been
off that.
nice to see Universal continue to shepherd it a little bit and continue to kind of go forward with it and salvage it themselves with another Michael Myers movie or something instead of just kind of giving up on it. But it is what it is.
Well, let me give you some more numbers here on Halloween 5. Halloween 5 is rated a 4.9 out of 10 on IMDb, has a 12% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes, a 28% rating on Metacritic, and just 64% of Google users liked this film. So I know in one of our previous episodes you said Google users doesn't really count if every film is about 75%. Well, there we go. We're under on this one.
Yeah, they well, and it's also a little bit of like that trend, like 5 is kind of regarded as a weak entry, so everyone's like, "Oh yeah, 5 sucks, screw 5," so it's like it's a kind of pile on kind of a thing.
And like with my thing is with like Rotten Tomatoes and stuff, I know with like these and the Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, things like that, they say like the formula is just getting repetitive and tiring, and there's not adding anything new to the films and the sequels. But like a 12%, so you're telling me roughly, like if you put it like this, like 1 out of every 10 reviewer gave this a fresh rating. Like I would at least say this film for like a horror movie is like a C rating. So I'm not gonna say it's a 10, I like 10% of the film or something like that.
Yeah, it's better than some other part 5s, I'll say that much.
We've talked about so many franchises. I don't know where you're going there, and I don't want to
Yeah.
ask because with our comparison coming up.
I'll say it's better than some other Part 5 horror franchises that we've talked about or that we haven't talked about.
There we go. I'll knock out my last two numbers for you, the most important ones of any horror film, and it's Michael Myers is on screen for about 17 minutes, or roughly about 18% of the film, and there are a total of 21 deaths in this film, including one dog, which averages to about one every 4.6 minutes in the film. So we're we're,
Yeah,
we're continuing to get with the quicker pace for the kill scenes or the deaths in the films.
indeed. While we're on the note of Michael's screen time, which seems pretty heavy, do we want to mix it up a little bit and start talking about the look and whether the mask and look of Michael is an improvement or downgrade from the previous entry?
Absolutely, if you'd love to take it away.
Yeah, I it's hard to say. I think I like the mask better than 4 overall. I think I like it better. I have mixed opinions on the neck of it, the bottom of it kind of being out
Kind of like flared.
versus tucked in, like if whether it's tucked in the shirt or out of the shirt. Because for certain like moments and images, it kind of creates a good look to have that extra white as part of the image, and it like kind of creates that like floating head kind of a thing. Like it kind of like there's something like the look and the shapes of it, no pun intended, like kind of works. And then but then there are sometimes where I'm like, it looks like a like I'm thinking about like it's such an awkward way to wear the mask. Like you wouldn't not tuck it in, right? Really? I don't know. It's but in general, I think like the face, I think it's better than 4. It's hard to say, but I think I like it better than 4.
I'll agree with you. I don't know if I liked the entire portrayal by Don Shanks better than George P. Wilbur does in
Yeah,
4, but I do like
yeah,
the mask better.
yeah. This is the first one where it feels overtly like Michael is like a very big, bulky guy. You know, like I know they bulked him up with padding in 4, but his overall frame still felt kind of normal, like in the first couple of movies. But I think this is one where they were like, oh well, Jason's a big bulking guy, so like Michael's going to be this big bulking, intimidating guy because we want him to do these powerful things where he's like ripping people's faces and impaling people and things like that. So there's a little bit of that going on, a little bit of like this is just, you know, Jason in a Michael Myers suit kind of a thing, but it's not the worst thing. But yeah, I have a little bit of a mixed opinion on that.
Yeah, it's hard to say because I mean I think George Wilbur in 4 and Don Shanks in this one do a great job. But if we're just talking about the mask, then this mask I think blows away 4. And I mean, it's not 4. 4 was just in my mind a terrible mask. I mean, getting anything after that, I think would have been better. But I do like 5, and but like you said, I don't know, the neck thing kind of gives me like a ick in this movie. I don't know what it is. It's almost like it's clearly not tucked in, but then it's almost like the bottom of the mask is like kind of like flared out. It's not.
Uh huh.
It doesn't sit like a normal mask would on somebody's face. So it kind
Yeah,
of
like they're
weird.
like yeah, almost like they're trying to play this fine line of like giving it wear and tear, like it's been sitting and used and whatnot, but trying to still make it look kind of like neat. I guess I don't know. It is definitely a you know is it. I don't blame anyone if they don't love it, but you know, in some ways it's better than 4. In some ways it's perhaps not. You know.
I guess it's all like dealer's choice. Like, what do you
Yeah.
prefer? So for
Yeah,
me, I
it does
prefer
have
Halloween
it does really billow out there at the bottom though, doesn't it? Like when I'm looking back at some images, like it
5.
really does flare out kind of wide. Like that thing's just kind of very kind of awkwardly sitting on his face and neck. It gives him a weird kind of proportion, you know.
Yeah, that's the only thing about me that I'm not really a big fan of. I've heard people call this, say the mask looks kind of like an alien face. I don't know, but if I see that, but the only thing for me that bothers me is that bottom of the mask kind of flaring out. Other than that, I think it's a pretty good improvement over 4.
Yeah, because it almost flares out as if like the bottom was meant to kind of fit in and cover like the upper part of like your collarbone or something, you know, when I think the mask is would be best suited as like a it clearly ends around the neck, you know, like there are later entries in the franchise where they kind of do like I think I'm thinking of like maybe like Halloween H2O a little bit where like the mask kind of clearly ends on the neck a little bit and it kind of gives a neater kind of look because you still get that bottom line that kind of gives you that like beginning and end margins of the white face, but it's not like flared out and billowing in this weird kind of way, you know, if that makes sense, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, in my rankings, Halloween 4 is still at the bottom if we're going mass, and then Halloween 5 is just above it. So it's a
Yeah, I would say
significant
I would
improvement.
say 4 5 2 1.
Absolutely, I 100% agree with you. That's exactly where my rankings are for the masks. Why don't I go ahead and throw some fun facts at you? I got like 9 or 10 here for you, and then my last one, again, I'll talk about some of the other horror franchises released the same year as this one. But my first one for you here, it's kind of just a thing that kind of bugs me because other films kind of add the subtitle and this one doesn't. So, despite the subtitle "The Revenge of Michael Myers," which appears on all movie covers and posters, it does not appear in the actual film. And in the actual film, it only says Halloween 5 in the opening credits. So that is like that
thank
bugs
you
me
for
so much.
thank you for scratching that itch for me. You know, it's so I don't know. Like I again, I've said it before. I get movie OCD with things like this. You know, they're, you know, Fast and Furious 6 comes out, and when it cuts to the title at the end of the movie, it just says Furious 6. You know, it's like, what are we? You know, it's like, what's going on here? You know, like these movies and like they're, you know, it yeah, and it's wild to think about that. It's completely marketed, promoted, whatever, officially as The Revenge of Michael Myers, but the title just says Halloween 5. So it's like was their decision made that late in the game that to call it Halloween 5: The Revenge of Michael Myers, that it was even after the opening credits were created for the movie, like you start to wonder, because it's like, even when you look at some of the posters, some of the posters make it seem almost like the Revenge of Michael Myers was added on, like it could have been added on as like an afterthought underneath the logo, like it was initially not that, and then they're like, oh no, we're gonna call it the Revenge of Michael Myers 2 now, so just add that to all of the promo art, and so it becomes this really kind of interesting thing.
That was just one of the things that, it was it irritated me. It got on my nerves every time I watched the film. So as soon as I seen that, I was like, we're gonna snag that one, and that's gonna be the first one I talk about. I
Yeah.
know we're some continuity buffs here on the podcast, so
Yeah, and I mean, yeah. So yeah, that was worth bringing up for sure, that the movie doesn't actually have that subtitle on it.
we're gonna edit it, and we're gonna make our own version where it says that in the opening titles.
Yeah, or redo all the posters and take out the subtitle. I don't know which ones. Redo all of the packaging and artwork to where it matches what the film itself is, since we can't change the film itself.
Right, exactly. I like this one. Donald Pleasance had disagreements with Akkad and Othenin Gerard, citing that Jamie should have been portrayed as all evil in the film after stabbing her stepmother. And Akkad disagreed, thinking that fans wanted to see more of the shape. And in an interview, Danielle Harris explained what she thought of the idea, saying, "The way Halloween 4 ended, I thought I was going to be the killer. I thought it would have been fun to come back as the killer or Michael's sidekick. Scary, but fun."
Yeah, and that could have been. I mean, I'm not here to say, because there's ways that could have been executed poorly, and there's ways that could have been executed more effectively. So it's like, that's an idea that, as a whole, in general, isn't automatically bad or good. It's all about how they chose to do it, because you could see maybe a scenario where little evil Jamie is like a hell of a creepy thing, depending on how they do it. But then you could also see it as just coming across as like very hokey. It's like, so it's all about execution. I'm not entirely in the camp of it should or should not have been. It would have been an interesting turn, but does it start to get into a weird dynamic where it's like Michael Myers now has like a little serial killer sidekick, even if it's Danielle Harris? Like, does that start to become weird? Like, are we rooting for Danielle Harris just because we like her? I don't know. It becomes a weird dynamic.
That was my thought for all the people who liked her and her portrayal of Jamie in Halloween 4. Like, do we root for her to kill everyone, or do we root for her to like somehow like rid the evil and turn back good? Or and then like at the end of the
Yeah,
film, like
and
does Jamie die somehow? Or
and if we're going with like evil Jamie, like, are we going to be doing this thing where like like Sam Loomis is shooting her 5 times and she's surviving, and like now we're like doing these like like we're trying to like violently murder a child, even though that child's like a murderer herself? Like, is it going to become like this weird dynamic where it's like we're rooting for the old man to like bash the kid's brains in or something? It's like, if it, like, is it going to become this weird kind of dynamic of like, what are we rooting for here and what's being portrayed on screen? Like, how dark and twisted can it feel?
it could have been done, but you would have had to have been like very careful with it, and it would have taken a lot of time and like a very good script to be written to pull it off.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
So my next one for you here kind of goes on how we were talking about the mask, and it's Don Shanks was originally set to wear the same mask as George P. Wilbur had worn in Halloween 4 in order to retain consistency between the movies, but the mask did not fit Shanks, so a new one was made for this film.
Yeah, and it looked like they just made some big thing that could just, some big, huge thing where it's like, well, this will fit. This is a one-size-fits-all kind of a mask.
Well, so I won't say too much on that one since we kind of already gave our opinions, but I just threw that in there in case anyone was wondering. Like, yes, they did make a new mask for the film, clearly.
Yeah.
Donald Shanks did all of his own stunts in the film, including swimming in 30-degree water and then crashing a car into a tree at 30 miles an hour and narrowly escaping the fire that ensued within the car.
Oof, that's crazy to think about. I do love that shot where the explosion goes off behind Michael and like the music kicks in and you kind of reveal like Michael has made his escape at the beginning of the movie, you know, and he floats downriver. I always really liked that. It's like a weird look to see kind of Michael like on the ropes a little bit and like just kind of like barely surviving instead of like always sort of in control and not being bothered by anything. So that was an interesting dynamic.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to do that stunt in 30 some degree water, but it's
Yeah, I don't
definitely a
think I'd
good
want to do
shot.
that stunt in any degree water, but yeah, 30 something definitely not.
But it is a very good scene, and like you don't think of that as a stunt in the film, but when the water's that cold and things like that, because that
Well, and
he
the
did
explosion's
that.
going off behind you, and technically, like anything, you know, could things like that. It's a little uncontrollable. Like that explosion's pretty close proximity to you, and then you're diving into the water. You know.
And they said that that river was the current was pretty strong. That he actually almost got it wasn't very deep, but he almost did get like pulled downstream where he had to. There were a couple takes where he had to swim to the edge and like catch onto a rock, and like they had to redo the scene. So I mean, it was definitely a stunt.
Yeah.
Here's another one about Donald Shanks. Don Shanks was 6'1", being the fourth shortest Michael Myers in Halloween film history. Below him at 6 foot is Tony Moran, who played the unmasked Michael Myers in the first Halloween. The second shortest is 5'10" at Nick Castle from the original Halloween. And then Dick Warlock in Halloween 2 was the shortest at 5'8.5". And in this film, camera angles were used to make Don Shanks appear taller and more imposing.
Yeah. At this point, like I guess George Wilbur was taller, but I suppose do you have height for him?
I do not. This is just
Okay,
our fourth
gotcha.
shortest.
Because well, George Wilbur isn't mentioned as being shorter than Don, but you from guessing it, you would think that because it feels like the biggest Michael's been, and maybe that's just more of his physique rather than his height and stature, but it certainly makes it. He feels huge in this movie, that's for sure.
George Wilbur is 6'2".
Okay, so 1 inch difference. Okay, so he's just slightly taller. Okay, fair enough.
And I thought in this film that Donald Shanks was definitely taller than 6'1", because I'm 6 foot, and I just feel like in the film that he's a much bigger guy than I am right now. So
Yeah, and maybe it is just kind of, he does have a lot of interactions with, you know, younger ladies and children and stuff, and so maybe that's just who he's paired up with kind of just makes him feel a bit bigger and more imposing.
yeah, standing next to the kids, and then the all the camera tricks to make him look taller. So
Hmm. Indeed.
director Dominique Othenin-Girard was the one who came up with Jamie's mutism. He thought it would be an interesting way to connect Jamie to Michael in a telepathic sense, and one of his goals was to make Michael Myers more human.
Yeah, I mean, to mixed results, I think, I think about how well this movie kind of could have been if it was more of a like Jamie can still be traumatized and maybe not very talkative, but a full blown mute was a little bit tough, and the psychic connection's a little wonky. And I would have liked to see, Rachel perhaps be in the movie as much as Tina was, and to maybe have Tina be dispatched earlier, and for Rachel to have more of that larger role, maybe not the same kind of role, obviously, because Tina gets up to some, stuff that Rachel wouldn't be getting up to really in the same way. But that kind of like, if Tina was dispatched earlier and Rachel was killed like 10 to 15 minutes before the end of the movie or whatever, like that would have made Rachel's death a lot more impactful. Like if she holds off Michael for Jamie to escape and she gets stabbed in the woods and that's where she dies, like that would have been a much bigger deal than having it be Tina, So, I feel like there's a couple of simple enough decisions of this movie could have kind of tweaked it into a way that was a little bit more satisfying. Like Jamie being mute feels good on paper, but in the movie itself, it feels like it goes on too much and it's a little played out and annoying. I don't know.
I don't have a big problem with her being mute for a good portion of the movie. I mean it's kind of annoying because I do like her as a little actress, and I like her portrayal. So I would have liked to get more of her, but I mean, for being mute for most of the film, I will say like there's scenes in this where like she lets out a couple screams, and I am impressed by the set of like the little lungs that she can express in
Yeah.
this film. Like when she's yesterday when I was watching it, and then this morning when I did like a couple quick glimpses through the scene where she's backing up and she's about to go over the balcony and just lets
Hmm.
out that scream. I was just like, that's impressive.
Hmm. Very much so. Very much so.
So going off what you just said a little bit ago is part of my next fun fact. So Mustafa Akkad had said one of his biggest regrets about the film was killing off the character of Rachel Carruthers. And in retrospect, he would have kept her alive, but she was killed in the attempt to show that no one, not even Rachel, was safe from Michael. So that is
Yeah.
the reasoning.
There's a trope in horror movies called, well, in all movies called sudden sequel death syndrome, which is when a returning character from the previous entry is killed off relatively quickly in the next entry. And I just wish they would have, like I said, it would, you get the shock value when it happens early, but you can't just lean on, oh, well, people know and like her from the previous movie, so we dispatch her quickly in this movie, it'll be shocking. It's like, well, it'd be a lot more shocking if she actually was a more meaningful part in this movie as well. And you maybe thought that this movie was going to end with another like Rachel, Jamie, Loomis versus Michael scenario, and then you kill her off like 2/3 of the way in. I feel like that would just leave a much bigger mark, but each to their own.
Yeah, I would have loved to keep her in this, and like you said, kind of right before the climax of the film, like she meets her demise there, saving Jamie or something. It would have been much more impactful, and you would have expected it from her over Tina.
Indeed, indeed. Plus, Tina's kind of annoying.
It says every fan of Halloween 5.
Yeah, I don't know anyone that's like, oh my gosh, I loved Tina, you know?
I thought she was spunky and fun, but still annoying. So
Spunky and fun. Yeah, and the sad truth is that unfortunately is that if Tina had a topless scene in the movie, I'm sure there'd be a whole Tina fan base that'd be like, nah, she's one of the best, you know, like I liked her a lot, you know. But
but that's not where we ended up.
nope, nope.
At around an hour and 29 minutes into the film, in the scene where Michael is ambushed by Dr. Loomis and beaten with a 2x4, Don Shanks was really hit with the plank, and he later admitted in an interview that Donald Pleasance broke one of his nose with one of the blows from the 2x4.
Oh gosh. Golly, yeah. Yeah, Donald Pleasance as Loomis goes full Captain Ahab off the rails in this movie. Like he goes very like he's in the deep end, you know, he's beyond like the hunter and he's like just like the crazed madman trying to catch the whale, you know. He's pulling out all the stops and endangering Jamie and doing whatever he has to try and get Michael, and it's interesting to see, that's for sure.
It definitely, like on a first time watch, it makes you wonder like how far is he gonna take this to trap his boogeyman and like kind of get what he wants. So it's a fun climax towards the end of the film.
Indeed. And then, you know, the first time watching through, they kind of play it up like he has a stroke, but it almost they were going to try and play it up like he was going to die there, you know. And I don't know if that was potentially the intention, but you know, I always like when I first saw it, I was like, oh, is he dying? Is he having a heart attack? Like, you know.
Yeah, he's. I wasn't sure where they went with that because like he definitely overexerted himself trying to beat Michael down. So I mean it does leave a question because you don't see him for the rest of the film. I don't believe, or is he?
Yeah, yeah, maybe that's something that they did just in case, you know, just in case they couldn't get Donald Pleasance back for another one. They kind of have an ending where it's like, oh yeah, he died or he didn't, you know. But then that also it's like, could you imagine waiting for 6 years for Halloween 6 and not really being sure if he died in that scene or not?
Wondering if he's gonna. Are we gonna see starring Donald Pleasance in the next trailer or something?
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So my last one for you here is about the box office gross of our big three. So Halloween 5 had the worst performance of the big three in the box office during 1989 with A Nightmare on Elm Street 5: The Dream Child being the most successful, grossing $22.1 million. It was the highest grossing slasher film released in 1989. And then Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan, followed, grossing $14.3 million domestically. And that was the lowest grossing for the series at the time. And then Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, had the lowest box office performance, grossing, again, just $11.6 million domestically, which, again, made it the least successful Halloween film to date. So, again, Halloween getting beat by Friday the 13th and A Nightmare on Elm Street.
Yeah.
We will talk
Yeah, I
about
mean,
Friday the 13th and Halloween here in a little bit, but I think Halloween 5 is a much better film than A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5.
Yeah, I think a lot of movies are better than Nightmare. I really am not a fan of Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, I can tell you that. Like,
No, I am right there with you.
yeah, and we'll talk about Friday 5 versus Halloween 5 here in a little bit, and unless you would like to move that discussion up to here and now.
No, absolutely not. I want to save that for the end. Keep people
All right.
in suspense.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
So, with that being all my fun facts for the film, who was your favorite character in Halloween 5?
I mean, you got to go with Jamie Lloyd. I think Loomis goes a little bit too crazy. I love Donald Pleasance's performance, but I think Loomis goes a little bit too off the rails here for me to be like, oh yeah, Loomis is my guy. It's like, man, Loomis is a little, he's off the deep end a little bit, but it's like, how do you, again, Danielle Harris, Jamie Lloyd, like the character and the actress, how do you not, love them in this movie? So it's got to be Jamie.
See, I wanted to go with Rachel, but I was just like, she's just not in the film enough
Yeah, she's there for
whatsoever,
like maybe 10 minutes,
Yeah, it's very short, and then like you said, I wanted to go with Donald Pleasance, and it was like this guy just goes off the rails a little bit, and he's acting a little crazy and takes it a little far. And then we get Meeker back, and he's not really in it enough. So it's like your default choice is to go with Jamie, even though she has a little bit of mutism in the film, and she's not like herself for half of the film. You could have picked Tina, but again,
no, you can't. You could not pick Tina. No, that's not an option.
No, you can't choose Michael because that's cheating. So it's
yeah.
So I went with Jamie as well. And I mean, once we get her back talking again in the film, and kind of she goes to the Tower Farm and sees Tina, and like kind of like goes back to the Myers house, and like we get her back into her childhood form and out of this like mutism, like little charade that she had. She actually turns a corner, and I actually like a lot of her acting from there. So I mean, she does a really good job for being such a young actress again. And it was just she was like the default choice, so I went with her. But I did like bits and parts of other characters in the film. So, but I ended up on Jamie the same as you did.
Yeah. There's not really much to choose from outside of that.
Wait till we get to the next one. No.
Yeah. Okay. Dude, don't get me. We'll talk about that when we talk about that.
All right, so I'll give you my favorite score, and my favorite score for the film. I looked up an extended version of the score that kind of cut some of like the longer tracks into a little bit more broken down on YouTube, and mine was called Halloween Finale, which was kind of Dr. Loomis. It's kind of like the final battle when they leave the attic and Michael is chasing Jamie down, and the Halloween theme kind of kicks in, and then it transitions from the Halloween theme to the Shape Stalks theme, and then again back to the original Halloween theme. And it's during the climax where Michael is kind of stalking Loomis and Jamie through the Myers house, and I just thought that had a really good impact on that final scene, so that was the one I ended up choosing.
Yeah, I call me boring, but I went with the opening title music just because I actually the opening credits of this movie I actually kind of dig, and it's got this. We've talked before about how like the late '90s and the early or the late '80s and the early '90s or the late '70s and the early '80s, like the transition period. It's like the opening credits and titles of this movies. You start to feel a little bit of that like the kind of 90s energy of like the bit more aggressive cutting and the more kind of arbitrary loud noises and effects and everything that would kind of like in particular actually plague the next entry of this franchise, that sort of like ADD editing style for horror movies or something. And you start to see twinges of it here in the opening title sequence of this movie, but I do like this kind of like slow burn version of the theme that then builds into the proper theme across the opening titles of this movie. It certainly sets a stage for a better movie than we get. But I that opening always stood out to me, and I always liked the music there.
Yeah, I love what they did with the main Halloween theme, how they kind of tweaked it a little bit for the end of Halloween 4, or like in Halloween 4 and continuing here in Halloween 5. And I do really like those opening credits, the cutting sounds of the pumpkin and everything. And I think the opening credits are very well done. So I absolutely like that you gave that a mention there. What was what was your favorite quote or most memorable line from this film? I really don't think we get too much
Yeah,
the Loomis spiels.
yeah, and I think I mean at this point, some of his stuff it just feels like it feels like you could be having GPT write generic Loomis dialogue, and it's just variations of like, look in his eyes, he's not human, the evil within him, the rage. It's just kind of like arbitrary things, and it's just there's less and less nuance in the writing for Loomis as these movies go on. He just feels more and more like a crazy old man. Donald Pleasant's still giving it his damnedest though. But I mean, it's a very very late in the film piece of dialogue. But Sheriff Meeker says, National Guard will take him to a maximum security facility where he'll stay till the day he dies. And Jamie just says he'll never die. And it's like this little girl is so pessimistic and so defeated by what's transpired with her over these last two Halloweens, and all her family's like dead, and her friends, and she's been traumatized, and it's like she shouldn't have that bleak of an outlook on life, but she does. But it's also incredibly accurate. Like she knows what she's dealing with. She understands. And so that's the line of dialogue that I actually like the most in the movie.
And there's no way you chose that, because I chose the exact same thing.
Fantastic.
I chose
Yeah.
that thinking like Chris is gonna come up with this like great quote, and I got this like bland statement from Meeker, and then
Oh, please. Yeah. What great quote within this film was I supposed to find, sir?
I'm not sure, but
You know.
I did not think it was gonna be the one I chose, but I chose
Yeah.
it for all the same reasons as you, and it's just it's just one of those
Yeah.
lines where without even thinking about it or without a snap of the fingers, like Jamie snaps back with "He'll never die," and as a fan, you know in your head like no, like they're gonna continue to keep making these movies. Like you're right, he's never gonna die. So and you don't want him to. So and it's just it's a good wrap up scene to where you think it's the end, and then we get the real ending of the film in a couple seconds, which people are like, oh my god, wait, like I thought it was over. So it's a nice little like fool's gold part like moment in the film.
Yeah. Forgive me if, someone's going to get hurt with that thing, wasn't the line of dialogue I was going with, or got her phone number, or Tina, like, catch the little girl, Michael.
Fortunately, we're lousy cops. No.
Yeah. Good lordy. Yeah. Never did anything like that when we were kids. No, we were normal.
All right, so I'll give you my favorite scene for the film, and I kind of battled back and forth between two with this one, between the car chase with Michael and Jamie and Billy, and then the Myers house finale where uh Michael shows up and kind of takes care of the two deputies that are left there, and from there on out, the attic scene, and then the confrontation between Michael, Jamie, and Loomis. But I think I went with the car chase because it's something you don't expect to see in these Halloween films. Is Michael chasing somebody in a car and nearly hitting Billy, and then continuing to chase Jamie through the trees, and it was a great effect done where Michael runs into the tree and the car explodes. I thought that whole chase scene was done really well. And again, it's just something you don't expect to see Michael Myers doing or something happening in these Halloween films. So that was the one I went with.
Yeah, I was actually trying to decide between those two sequences as well. The chase with the car is the one that I went with as well, because it looks extremely dangerous when you're seeing it in the movie. It's like, I'm sure there were safety precautions in this and that, and I'm sure they were doing whatever they did to possibly make it safe, but it literally just looks like a car is driving after some kids in some shots, and it's like, wow, like, how wrong could that have gone? And yeah, that's just such a different kind of thing, because it's not just Michael like driving a car as a utility to get somewhere. He's like attempting to use the car as a murder weapon, which is kind of wild for Michael, because like we've seen that like he's not really, he's got a shotgun in his hand and he impales someone with the shotgun. He doesn't shoot it. So it's like the idea that he would just like run someone over. It's like this weird kind of dynamic, but it's a very intense scene because it's just ramped up to this higher level of intensity than a Michael Myers chase has ever done. He'll only walk at someone, but he's okay with stepping on the gas to go after him. Like it's just a unique dynamic. But yeah, that's probably the most. I've got to give a shout out to the little to the laundry chute scene. It's so intense when she's down there as a kid. It drove me up a wall when he's trying to stab through to get her and she's trying to crawl up. That is just like, it was the most intense thing in the world to be like. Being trapped in a relatively small space is something that kind of like twists the nerve for me a little bit. But then the idea that like you would be in like a vertical laundry chute while someone's trying to stab through it, and it's like, oh my goodness. And there's the great moment where she like steps on the blade to jump, and from what I understand, there's a cut shot that was not in the movie where the knife would go through and stab her leg, and you see the beginning of the shot because it's in slow motion, and they clearly cut away. And then when she gets out of the laundry chute, her leg is bleeding and she's limping because they cut the scene where the knife got her in the leg and it bled a lot, I guess. And I guess they just didn't want to show that kind of violence on a child. So, but that sequence is also great.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that because that is a phenomenal scene in the film. And it's just I know we talk about Michael kind of chasing someone down with a car, but I like in this film how they get a little more experimental with the weapons and stuff. He uses a pitchfork to kill someone. He uses like a scythe to kill someone. I believe he kills Tina's boyfriend Mike with, it's like a garden claw or something like that. It's not just your normal kitchen knife, so they get a little bit more experimental in this one. I like that they went that route.
Indeed.
So with I wanted to say that before I asked you, what was your favorite death or kill scene in the film?
I my favorite person to get killed was Tina, but I like seeing Mikey get hit in the face with the gardening hoe, I guess, the gardening claw, just because Mikey was like, he had douche written on him from the very beginning, and to see him just get that to the face was kind of satisfying. It felt like the kind of kill you would see in a Friday the 13th movie instead of a Halloween movie. And then it kind of gets this setup later where it's like Michael is posing as Mikey in the vehicle, and like Tina goes and like leans to kiss him, and it's like you don't know what's gonna happen, and it's like being really weird. It's like they these weird things with Michael where he's like always kind of like observing people, like getting it on or hovering around when they're nude, and then like you get these weird moments like Halloween 2 where his hands on her shoulder and she's like kissing his fingers and stuff, and then she leans in and kisses him while he's got the mask on here. Like they always like feed in these weird kind of like sexual tension moments with like Michael in these movies, and you don't notice it very much until you're like watching a couple of the movies in a row. But it's like it's always a weird kind of scary, uneasy kind of energy, and so I like that too.
I did like the Mikey kill because, like you said, he had douche written all over him. I on the rewatch. Yes, Tina's annoying, but I felt bad for her, and I liked that. I liked that she did
Yeah, I
come
was
in
not
like,
rooting for her to die, but I was glad to not have her in the movie anymore.
no, not the obnoxious teenager. I I just thought she was as obnoxious as she was with some of the like her personality traits and things like that, the laughing, the giggling, the little bit like over the top acting. I thought she was fun. I felt bad that she got killed, but I liked the way she got killed, as in coming to save Jamie, like just like last minute, like throwing herself in the way. Like I did like that, but I ended up going with the deputy Charles, and he was the one who was actually upstairs with Jamie in the room. And it was because like he's just kind of talking with her, like having like a nice like conversation, like talking like, do you want to practice our signals? Like if you like she knocks the broom, Jesus Christ, the brush. She knocks the brush on like the table, and he's like, if you do that good and loud, I'll be out here in a flash, and you're one brave little girl. And it makes you like respect the guy, like, and he's his death is coming because he's in the way between Michael and Jamie.
Yeah,
And the
and plus
way,
in a horror movie, someone who's too douchey is marked for death, and then someone that just seems too nice and wholesome is always marked for death too. Like
yeah, and
he's not a main character, he's not a young person, and he's a police officer, and he's like he just seems like a nice guy. It's like, oh, this guy is gonna get eviscerated. Like
yeah, and it's just the way that he goes. He's Michael's trying to break through the door. He shoots him a couple times, and my thought here is you're shooting him with a pistol when you just broke the window with a rifle or shotgun or whatever it is that you had. Like I'm loading that thing up and I'm trying to take this guy's head off with the shotgun, but then he throws the rope out the window and he ends up getting hung with like the rope ladder. And I just thought that would be a horrible way to go for somebody who was kind of just showing this little girl that he cares about her and is going to try to protect her. So that's the one I went with.
yeah, not a bad one at all.
So for that is all our favorite categories. If we want to dive into our comparisons for Friday the 13th and Halloween, and then get into some final thoughts on Halloween 5. So do you want to take away comparison, or would you like to go first on final thoughts?
Oh, I'll go first on comparison.
All right, take it away.
Yeah, I think that Halloween 5 is better than Friday the 13th Part 5. Halloween 5 retains Donald Pleasance, retains Danielle Harris, feels like a full continuation off of Halloween 4 in terms of plot and overall style. It's got Michael back properly as the killer, and it's got some faults and some issues and some problems, but more so the beginnings of it, not really in this film itself. And it's a little bit of an off, it's getting a little off center in terms of the style and the whatever of the franchise, but it's still a Halloween movie. It's still a decent part 2 to Halloween 4. And, it doesn't feel like we've gone afield here. We got that out of the way for Halloween with part 3. Friday the 13th Part 5 is no Jason, imitation killer, Tommy being mute, not having Corey Feldman back. And it's just like, it could have been any slasher movie of any variety, in any franchise, really. And so Friday the 13th Part 5 is very, very low on my Friday the 13th chart. Halloween 5 is low on my Halloween chart, but one versus the other, I'll take Halloween 5 over Friday 5 every day of the week.
Okay, I like where you're coming from here, and I'm gonna agree with you. I'm gonna take Halloween 5, and the way I've done it so far is, I take characters, kills, music, things like that, and in in Halloween 5, I'm gonna take the characters, and I'm gonna take the kills, and because in the Friday the 13th Part 5, it's a lot of cutaways, and we don't really get the gore that we're used to in the Friday the 13th franchise. And Halloween 5 kind of takes it up a notch in this one with some of the kills and some of the way people are killed. And Friday the 13th has the nudity going for it, but that's not going to win me over for a film. Maybe when I was like 5 years old, sure, but like I think Halloween 5 has the better music. Again, you said Michael is back and Jason Voorhees is not in Friday the 13th Part 5. Of course, I still like Tommy Jarvis. I will take Dr. Loomis and Jamie over him any day. And it's just, I think Halloween 5 is a much better follow up to Halloween 4 than Friday the 13th Part 5 is to Friday the 13th Part 4. So I'm in my little comparison, Halloween takes the lead after this one 3-2. So we'll see what happens. I know you're still Friday the 13th is up 3-2 for you, I believe.
Yes. Yep. I've got Friday up 3-2. Yep.
All right, so we're not far off here. We're 3-2, leaning in opposite directions here. But I'll dig into some final thoughts for you on Halloween 5. For me, I did not expect to enjoy this one as much as I did on my rewatch. Like I said, growing up, I loved it, and it kind of faded for me. And characters like Tina and the Thorn kind of moving more towards the Thorn story a little bit in this one. Kind of just they threw me off a bit, threw me for a loop, and kind of made me not appreciate this much as not appreciate this as much as I did when I was a younger kid. And kind of on the rewatch, I kind of got over that and watched it for what it is. I come to these movies for Michael Myers, to see some kills, and to have a good time in a horror movie. And I think this film delivers that for the most part. Not as much as some of the previous entries, but I definitely had a much better time on the rewatch than I did on previous rewatches of the film. So yeah, I'm glad we're doing this, and I can't wait to get to the next film in the franchise.
Yeah. Better, it's no longer as good as I used to consider it when I was a kid, but it is better than I was worried it would be based on my memory. It takes some missteps, it makes some weird decisions, it plants some bad fruit, but it's not entirely the fault of this movie that they didn't come to fruition in a good way. It gives us a little bit of more of all the things we liked about Halloween 4, as well as plenty of things that we didn't like about Halloween 4 are given to us by this movie. So, it's a solid entry in the franchise. It still feels like the last old school Halloween movie. It is the last movie of the 80s, so I mean, in terms of timeline, that's very clear. But after this, we're clearly delineated between like a more vintage style and then a more sort of like modernized studio approach to horror. And so this is like the last of a little bit of the last of that old era, and so I appreciate it for that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, on our next episode, clearly this was followed with a sequel, and we will be looking at that. So, this was followed by Halloween: The Curse of Michael Myers, which was released on September 29th, 1995. And that film is a whole mess in itself, released almost 6 years later. And that's going to be an episode to talk about, with the different cuts of the film and all the differences and stuff. So I mean, that'll be one that we are definitely going to have to dig deep into. So I can't wait for that one. That should be a lot to talk about.
100%. Really looking forward to that.
So before we get out of here, as always, I want to thank you, because this is so much fun. I am having a blast with these Halloween films, digging into these and talking about these. My favorite horror franchise since I was a real little guy. So thanks to you for joining me on them.
Oh yeah, it's fun. The nostalgia trip back down, memory lane of movies that I used to just watch religiously, every other weekend, all through summer, every Halloween, just these are the franchises that I would just binge. And so it's fun to kind of revisit them, a decade and a half later.
Especially like you said, on kind of like a binge watch. You might watch one here and there, but being able to watch these like week after week after week, kind of like where your memory is very fond of the previous one. It's been fun. It's going to continue to be fun.
Absolutely.
So thank you for joining me. Thank anyone who's out there listening as well. I will say, do not forget, and please, if you're listening to an episode, vote on the poll that's under the episode. I love to see the opinions of others. But again, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers on our next episode. And until next time.
National Guard will take him to a maximum security facility where he'll stay till the day he dies.
Never die.